What's up, guys? It's Benny. Shout out to all the people who stayed very salty and very frosty on this creepy and dark, twisted story out of Minnesota. Turns out the noticers were right again. There is something else going on here, and now we have the proof. Vance Belcher, the alleged lone wolf who just went crazy and started killing politicians out of nowhere. He was just managing a 7-Eleven a couple months ago. Don't worry, he's totally MAGA. Just listen to the media. No, he's definitely not. And when we watched him get apprehended by special forces with that creepy MK Ultra look in his eye, something didn't square. And the entire internet noticed, at least those who wish to ask questions about things like this, something seems very off, everyone said. And now it turns out to be true. Now, here's what we know. We know that his wife worked for Tim Walz. Here's the proof. She worked for Tim Walz in 2011 when he was a congressman. We know that he had an anti-Trump No Kings posters in the back of his vehicle, not exactly MAGA activities. We know that he was a murderous monster. At least that's what the authorities say. This is him in this strange footage. I wish they'd release all of it with a latex mask on, dressed like a police officer. This is before he committed his murders. We know that the police officers engaged him outside of the house of the Speaker of the House, a Democrat named Melissa Hortman in Minneapolis, dressed like this. They got into a firefight, and then they let him enter the home and commit the murders and then escape, which makes no sense to me. No one's yet been able to explain that to me. Doesn't make any sense. We know the police fired a hail of bullets. Somehow the out of shape, limping, overweight Vance Belcher was able to get away and escape, even though they had the house surrounded. And then this master criminal just kept leaving clues like this, straight out of a Scooby-Doo novel. Here's his hat that just happened to be found on the side of the road. Vance Belcher himself was appointed by Governor Walz. Here's the letter of appointment. Business member for the governor's Workforce Development Board. This is a prestigious workforce. And here's Tim Walz's signature. So the two definitely knew of each other. I mean, that Tim Walz is signing the paperwork with his name on it. I mean, there's no way to argue against that. But the question remained, why the hell would this guy do this? He has a very strange background. He worked for an NGO that was relocating Africans to Minnesota. Again, that don't make no sense. He left his family of 5. He commits these murders. He's found in a field. There's something missing here. Well, we found out yesterday that Vance Belcher blamed Governor Walz in a confession letter. Now, this is after authorities told us, no, there's no confession letter. There's no manifesto. Well, which one is it? Because here are credible and very respected Minnesota news outlets writing exclusive. Vance Belcher blames Tim Walz for rampaging confession letter. Okay, what does the letter say? Multiple sources with direct knowledge of the investigation claim that to Alpha News that Belcher's so-called confession letter was intended to go to Kash Patel, director of the FBI. Well, now we've learned something even more horrifying. Just like that, the story gets more disturbing. Minnesota assassin Tim Walz appointee Vance Belcher wrote a letter to the FBI claiming the military trained him in secret. Huh? And that Tim Walz personally instructed him to take out these politicians and target other Democrat politicians. Representative Amy Klobuchar was one that was listed. This is a senator from Minnesota. And some have speculated that Tim Walz wanted to run for the Senate seat. The military trained him? That's what he says? He said he was secretly trained, covertly trained by the military? Let's watch.
Who disguised himself as a cop to shoot down Democrat politicians and their spouses. He killed 2 and seriously injured 2 others. Today, we're finding out he wrote a letter to the FBI claiming he was trained by the U.S. military, quote, off the books. And that Tim Walz asked him to kill Amy Klobuchar so he could take her Senate seat. Belcher's facing state and federal murder charges.
Did I just hear that right? What is the background there? Can I read more? Yes, here from the Minnesota Star Tribune, the biggest paper in all of Minnesota. Letter to the FBI after the shooting suspect made wild claims about Klobuchar and Walz, sources say. People with direct knowledge say Vance Belcher addressed the FBI. In this letter, they frame the letter as rambling and conspiratorial, but can you please produce the contents of the letter? Accused Minnesota assassin wildly claimed that Tim Walz instructed him to kill Amy Klobuchar. Belcher alleged in the letter that Democrat vice presidential candidate directed him to murder Amy Klobuchar as part of a supposed plot to take her Senate seat. The Minnesota Star Tribune reported. Is this why they hid the manifesto? This is why they keep lying? They have had multiple different stories on this. You always know that someone's trying to cover something up when the stories aren't consistent and when they start to lie to you, even about small things. We heard there was a manifesto, then we heard the authorities were going through the manifesto, and then the authorities told us there was no manifesto. Was this why? In a rambling conspiratorial letter addressed to the FBI, Governor Tim Walz instructed him to kill Senator Amy Klobuchar and presumably other Democrats so that Walz could run for U.S. Senate. According to two people familiar with the contents of the letter is the clearest evidence yet of Belcher's mindset after the targeted violence against Minnesota politicians last week. It's 1.5 pages long, confusing and hard to read, according to two people familiar with the letter's content. It includes Belcher's alleging that he had been trained by the U.S. military off the books, and that Walz, who is not running for Senate, had asked him to kill Amy Klobuchar and others. Well, release the letter, I guess, right? I mean, are any word from the U.S. military on this? Has there been any type of report other than to just call him a conspiracy theorist? Can we just get some verifiable evidence that there's no connection here? Because everything that we see, that there is a connection here. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. Like the guy, nothing in the guy's story makes any sense. He does have connections to Tim Walz. He does have a life that can't be explained. He was working at a 7-Eleven. Then he's working as a security guard. Then he's working as a mortician, pulling eyeballs out of corpses. That's a matter of fact. And then he was running a nonprofit to resettle Africans into Minnesota. And then more importantly, is this why the house was burgled? This is something that I still can't square. The murder scene, somebody broke into the murder scene and cased the place. They didn't take anything. They didn't rip any TVs out of the wall. They didn't take any of the jewelry. They just went in, nothing was missing, and cops said, don't worry about it, forget about it. But the house was, the murder scene was burglarized. What is it? What the hell is that about? For the life of me, I can't figure this one out, but it seems like a cleanup operation to me. It just seems like that would be the only reason to go burglarize a murder scene, break in reported at home of assassinated Minnesota lawmaker days after double murder. So why would anybody why would anybody need to break in here? Is there something more that they're trying to cover up? Are they trying to clean up their tracks? I mean, that's the only logical explanation. See if this makes any sense to you. Here's the authorities, here's the police officers explaining how they engaged Vance Belcher outside of this residence. The authorities let him listen carefully here. The authorities let him into the house, allowed him to go in, commit the murders, and then escape by their own admission. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm just old fashioned, but that just, all of it seems off. And now with this explanation, like, can we get a proper, I hope we get a proper investigation here. Somebody needs to call in Tim Walz for questioning. I think that's probably a good place to start. Anyway, here's the clip.
Belcher then traveled to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, in the home of Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Belcher arrived at Representative Hortman's house in his black SUV with the police license plates. He parked in the driveway and left the emergency lights on his SUV flashing as if he was a police officer. Belcher approached Representative Hortman's home, again dressed as a police officer, wearing the tactical vest and body armor and wearing that hyper-realistic mask. He was armed and carrying a flashlight. Before he entered the home, 2 Brooklyn Park police officers arrived at the scene. They too had been dispatched to check on Representative Hortman after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman. When they arrived at the scene, they saw Belcher's black SUV parked in the driveway with the emergency lights flashing, and they saw Belcher standing in front of the house several feet from the door. When Belcher saw the officers get out of the car, he drew his weapon and began firing. He rushed into the house through the front door, firing into it. He repeatedly fired into the house. And when he entered, he murdered Representative Hortman and her husband, Mark. The Brooklyn Park police officers fired at Belter as he rushed into the home, but he escaped into the home and out the back.